If you've ever wanted to learn about negotiation, one of the most common books that you'll hear about is this book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss with Tal Raz. Since its publication in 2016, it has become a classic and a Wall Street Journal bestseller as the OG negotiation masterclass. So in honor of the authors Chris Voss and Tal Raz, let me share with you my favorite takeaways from this negotiation mastery book. If you like to listen to Never Split the Difference completely for free as an audiobook, don't forget that you can do so by signing up to Audible with my link at audibletrial.com/AlvinThePM. So my number one takeaway from Never Split the Difference is that every negotiation is a collaboration. Before I read this book, I thought that negotiation was always trying to win, doing something at the other person's expense. That negotiation was like this big uphill battle that I was getting myself into, that I would have to be extremely aggressive in order to win and defeat that other person. In other words, for me to win, you are going to have to lose. But since reading Never Split the Difference, I've learned that negotiation should be treated more as a collaboration where you work with the other person to achieve a common goal. You're working with that person to solve their problem together. And when you approach it in that way, you're going to be using what Chris Voss calls tactical empathy to build trust with that person. You're going to be appealing to their feelings and their emotions because we're human beings. So you're going to focus on building rapport and a feeling of mutual respect, so they're going to be more likely to see things from your point of view. Empathy is just being aware of the other person's perspective. Who is the other person whom you're talking to? What are their goals, their desires, and their fears? How do they see things, and what are they feeling at that moment? What are they really after? When you're aware of what they're feeling, you can tactically use this information and apply it to your dialogue with the other person. And then you can negotiate your deal by appealing to their emotions and their senses, hence the word tactical empathy. Now, my second takeaway is to master your voice. The way that you say something is as important as the words that you're using. Chris Voss talks about two key voices that you can use from your toolkit depending on the scenario. The first is the playful voice, which should be your go-to about 80% of the time whenever you're negotiating. Since it's playful, you want to smile when you're saying your words to build a trust and to soften those harsh words. For example, instead of saying things very aggressively like the price for our service is $99 versus the price for our service is $99. It's a very subtle twist, right? Like, come on, you want to be playful and you want to smile when you're talking. So you want to say it like, I know it's crazy and I don't intend to back you into a corner. I have to tell you the truth, but I want to make sure that it doesn't offend you. Now, the way that Chris Voss talks about it is the smiling voice is very effective because it keeps people in a positive frame of mind. And that's what Chris Voss recommends as our default. The second voice is called the slow late night FM DJ voice. You want to use this less than 20% of the time. This is the calm, soothing voice that has a downward inflection. Not upward inflection, but downward. It's simply slowing your cadence down and you're exaggerating every syllable. And when you use it, the other party won't feel like they're backed into a corner. For example, let's say that you're negotiating the scope of your project with a client, but you want to prevent scope creep. So you could say the phrase, "We're not accepting changes after we sign this document." To apply the slow, late night FM DJ voice, you'd say, "We're not accepting changes after we sign this document." Can you see the subtle difference there? When you're firm on the terms of conditions or you're working on a contract and you just want it to stick and you want the other person to really get it and not feel backed into a corner, then you want to use that late night FM DJ voice. It slows down the brain of the person on whom you're using it on. So the way you use your voice will pull out different versions and kinds of emotions from the person you're talking to. If all you do is just use a cold voice 100% of the time, you're going to get hard, cold reactions. So learn to use the appropriate voice with the correct tone to build the trust and the influence with the person you're talking to. Now, before we move on to the next lesson, make sure to smash that like button because it shows me your support so I can keep creating high quality content just like this. So my third takeaway is to act like a mirror during your negotiations. As Chris Voss says it, negotiation is the art of letting the other side have your way. So mirroring gets the other person to talk and to present you with the deal that you want, except it's coming from their own words and they're going to think that it was their idea. So in one sentence, if I had to summarize it, mirroring means that you're going to repeat a few words, usually the last 3 to 4 words that the other person has just said. For example, the other person could say, "We're running into problems with our subcontractors due to material sourcing issues." To mirror that, you could say material sourcing issues, and you'd end that with an upward inflection. Mirroring works because it connects the other person's thoughts to what you're saying, and it shows them that you're actually listening to what they're communicating to you. Have you ever heard the saying, you don't have to be the most interesting person in a room, you just have to be interested in what other people have to say. So use your mirror with an upward inflection to show genuine curiosity and to gather information from the other person. Get the other party to feel like they're being involved in the negotiation, and use mirroring to build rapport. We all know that people love to be asked questions. By mirroring, you're going to sound like you're interested in what the other person has to say. Here's an example of how mirroring would work. Your price is too high. The price is too high? Yeah, we have a limited budget. You have a limited budget? And then the other person keeps elaborating and they give you context and they'll feel like you're working with them to understand the situation and the context. And then you can use that information to negotiate what you're looking for. Remember that it's all about diving into a person's psychology and emotions, using what Chris Voss calls tactical empathy to negotiate your deal. Now, my fourth takeaway is to master how to label the other person's feelings, their emotions, and the situation. Labels are the most useful skill to have, and it's super simple and effective to use. First, you want to be aware of the emotion of the other person you're talking to. Then all you gotta do is just label it by saying it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, or it feels like. For example, it seems like you're upset with this contract. That is going to trigger contemplation in the other person, and it's going to deactivate and lower any negatives that they're experiencing. You don't want to say it with the first person pronoun like, "Now what I'm hearing is," or "I think that you are X, Y, and Z," because it comes off as if you are more interested in your own agenda and your own perspective instead of other people's. So instead, use one of these 3 phrases that I'm showing on the screen to label the emotions and what you think the other person is experiencing. When you label a negative emotion, it actually deactivates that feeling in the other person. Let's say that you can tell the other person is angry and they're upset at the situation. You could label that emotion and say, "It sounds like you're frustrated with our work." Now, if the negative emotion is actually there, then that label itself will decrease the feeling of that negative emotion. Now, on the other hand, labeling a positive emotion reinforces it. For example, "I appreciate you for being generous with your time. It really feels like you're being very generous with me right now." And in a split second, just by labeling, you can change the tone of the other person because you're appealing to their inner thoughts and their emotions, and you're going to be able to tease out more information that you might need, and especially if you want to elaborate it on, which ultimately can help you negotiate what you're looking for. Let's do a quick example here. "It sounds like this deal is making you upset." Well, it's not making me upset. It's just that we're having budget cuts right now across the organization. Budget cuts across the organization? Yeah, it happened recently earlier this year due to a slow growth in the past quarter. So you can see here with my example that when you combine labeling with mirroring, you're actually convincing the other person to move with their own words, not your words. So you're removing yourself as a threat, which means that meaningful dialogue can still happen. You're giving off a tone that you want to collaborate and you can negotiate your terms. The next takeaway of mine is to ask calibrated, open-ended questions. As Chris Voss says it, the secret to winning a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. Next time you're in a discussion with someone, instead of asking, why do you need that? Or why are we doing this? Drive the conversation forward by asking an open-ended question in the form of a what or a how. For example, how am I supposed to do that? How do you want to proceed? What's the forecast for next quarter? Or what are you struggling with currently? Ever had your parents scold you when you were growing up, when you made a mistake, and they said, why did you do that? And then all of a sudden, you became defensive and you felt like you were doing something completely wrong? So when we ask why someone wants something, it can feel like an accusation that makes the other person feel uncomfortable and go on the defense. So instead of saying why, change that to say what or how. For example, instead of saying, why do we need to do that? Change that phrase and ask, what do you hope to achieve by doing that? How should we proceed? What are the next steps? Now, here's another example. Why do you need this done by the end of the day? Change that phrase to what makes it important to get it done by the end of the day. Just changing it from why to what removes that burning, stinging, and that sensation like you're being accused of something, and it takes out that feeling of defensiveness. And in so doing, we're making the other side feel safe and we're giving the illusion of control to solving the problem on them. Now, my next takeaway is to ask no-oriented questions, where it influences the other person to answer no by default. When you use yes-oriented questions, it makes people feel like they have to give you a commitment. Using a no-oriented question relieves their feeling of guilt and feeling like they have to commit to you. So when we say no, we feel safe, we feel protected. You don't feel any fears or worries about telling your problems, and you're more likely to give additional pieces of information. For example, when you hear someone say or even message you, do you have a few minutes to talk? Your first gut instinct is, no, I don't want to talk to you. And if you do say yes, you're probably already thinking, how do I get off the phone from this person and what exactly did I get myself into? So instead of saying, do you have a few minutes to talk? Change that to be, is now a bad time to talk? Here's a few more examples. Do you agree with this? Change that phrase to, do you disagree? Is this a good idea? Change that to, is this a ridiculous idea? When you're writing emails, you can even use the same strategy and say, is it a ridiculous idea if we proceed with this strategy? Or are you against using this design for our prototypes? Now, these are just some of my examples. And my most important takeaway from this book is to bargain like a pro using the Ackerman system. When you're trying to bargain with someone, you don't want to immediately ask for the price that you actually want. Instead, you want to do it in increments using 6 steps. Let's go through an actual example to demonstrate this. Let's say that you're buying a new furnished table at the flea market that costs you $500. The person is offering you a sale value of $500. Let's say that you'd like to buy this table for $400, so a $100 discount. The first step would be to offer to the other person 65% of your target price, which would be the equivalent of 65% of $400, which equals $260. But before you actually offer this price to the other person, you want to appeal to their emotions and call it out first, like this. Listen, I do have a price, but I don't think you're gonna like it. It's gonna be really low, and I don't know, I just have a feeling that if I give you this price, you're going to get really angry with me. So when you say it like that, you want to go in first with an emotional anchor so that the other person imagines the worst price possible. And then when it's safe to do so, then you apologetically say your price of $260. Now, after that, you enter into the second step where you're going to use tactical empathy. You're going to apologize to the other person like this. You know, I'm sorry. I can tell that I upset you. You're asking for a very reasonable price and I'm just being ridiculous. When the other person comes down from their number, then you say something like, wow, Thank you so much for that. I can tell that you're being very generous with me. Now you can increase your offer by 20%, which in our case would be $400 times 85%, which equals $340. Now, when you make this counter offer, the other side should feel like they've already accomplished something because they were able to have you increase your offer. Again, use tactical empathy and appeal to their emotions so the other side decreases their number again. Now, in the third step, you want to increase your offer by 10%, which would be $400 times 95%, which equals $380. Again, just like the last time, you're going to go through another round of using empathy and acknowledging how generous they are. Now, for the last and final step, you want to give your final number, and you want it to be an odd number. If your goal is to spend $400, then say something like $397.63. As you're negotiating, don't forget that it's not just the monetary price. There could even be follow-up services and add-ons that they can throw in to make this a deal. Thank you guys so much for watching, and in the spirit of growing our careers, if you want to learn how to be a much more effective leader by implementing the 4 disciplines of execution, please watch this video right here, and I'll see you in the next one.